From SBI's Executive Briefing Center in Dallas, Texas, the most watched and listened to content in B2B sales and marketing, it's the SBI Podcast with your host, Matt Shares.
Welcome to SBI TV, a weekly show dedicated to helping you make your number. Today we're going to demonstrate how an enterprise sales leader brings the best of the enterprise to a fast-growing tech company. My name is Matt Shares. I'm the CEO of SBI, and I'm also your host. Joining me today in the studio is Ryan Mang. Ryan is the Chief Revenue Officer for Axial. Ryan came up through the ranks of large enterprise sales forces and now is leading sales for a high-growth tech company, emerging from the startup phase and into the scale phase. And he's here to share his experience. So Ryan, first off, welcome to the show. So why don't you introduce yourself and Axial to the audience, please?
Sure. Well, it's nice to be here. My name is Ryan Mang, Chief Revenue Officer for Axial. For those that aren't familiar, Axial is a private network for the middle market. We are a deal origination tool that connects buyers and sellers, capital providers, in a very proprietary way. Happy to be here.
And then prior to Axial, Ryan, talk a little bit about your background and sort of where you started and how you now ended up in the destination job of CRO.
Sure. So I've always been attached to sales in some way, shape, or form. Although started out my collegiate career going to school for broadcast journalism, but made a leap of faith into sales right out of school, given a personal, professional, family background, and was sort of pushed into the fire with an outside sales job right out of school that I'm very proud of because I was that person knocking on doors.
Awesome.
Cold calling 100 to 150 calls a day, doing everything I could to make a number.
And for the audience, where did you start your sales career?
So I started my sales career at a little-known tech company called Lanier that was eventually absorbed by Ricoh. 2.5 of the best years of my professional career.
Hardcore, man.
And if I had seen anybody else that came through those ranks, I would have looked at that resume a few times over. So it was very, very cool. And then spent the next 10.5 years at ADP. Had an unbelievable career. I got exposed to a lot of different things. I was fortunate enough to start within a business that was just starting up within ADP, and then exposed to a lot of their new go-to-market products, go-to-market initiatives, and eventually getting into the private equity realm of ADP, which ultimately led me to where I am today.
Awesome. What a story. And if you can tell by Ryan's voice, he has a way cooler voice than me. Sounds like he should be a DJ. So I'm going to try to do the least amount of talking and let the guy with the cool voice do it all, and he's got the cool beard. So right now it's 2-0, and he's got a great head of hair.
Relatively new.
So technically it's 3-0 for you. So I'm being completely outstaged on my own platform. All right. So Ryan, I'm always curious, just to eat our own dog food. How did you first become aware of SBI?
So I have a very good friend that connected me with SBI. I am sort of a sales thought leadership junkie.
Okay.
I think the minute I started reading the sales acceleration formula not so long ago, I was permanently connected and committed to reading anything that was considered thought leadership out of the sales realm, and SBI is no exception to that rule. So it's just very cool to be connected, to be here, and to be part of something that I've been proactively listening to. It's very, very cool.
Well, it's good to have you here. All right, so if you're watching or listening out there to what Ryan and I are going to cover, and you don't want to miss any of the new content that we produce, we release a couple of shows a week. If you're an iPhone user, just download the SBI app. You'll have access to notifications that are pushed to you. Listen to it on your commute while you're lifting weights. Just search for Sales Benchmark Index in the App Store and download it to your iPhone. All right, we're going to jump into the questions. So I guess, Ryan, knowing that you grew up in what I would call sales academies. I grew up at Cintas, another hardcore sales academy. Much of our DNA here has EMC, Cintas, hardcore, 100 calls, go, 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 go. Yeah. So I appreciate and very gravitate to that sort of DNA. What have been some of the big challenges going into hyper-growth tech company?
Yeah, so it's such an interesting question. And the dynamics of the firm that I'm currently in today versus looking backwards are actually not that different. So I was exposed to a lot of young products that were just hitting the market at ADP that I was responsible for growing and selling. Okay. At the same time, I was also responsible for going into new markets with existing products and growing and scaling. Okay. So I got to see both sides of the equation which really helped me sort of transition into this fast-paced type of environment. Now, the major difference is I'm sitting at a Fortune 200 company with unlimited resources, the ability to go out and pretty much do what I please because they had that trust, they had that faith in me to do the right thing. And then when you come into the startup world and you're expected to do a similar type of thing with a lot less resources, your mind starts to become a lot more important.
Sure.
And then you start to reflect some of that creativity that I was sort of itching for when I was at my former life, and now that itch is not only being satisfied, it's turned into a burn of sorts. And here I am responsible for doing a lot of different things with limited resources, but having a lot of fun doing it.
Okay, so, and as we tell our story, so how long have you been in the role now?
So I've been in the role for just under a year.
Okay, just under a year.
Under a year.
Yep, so that's a good amount of time. So one of our philosophical beliefs as a firm is that revenue growth excellence is 50% talent and 50% the conditions in which you place that talent. So let's start with the performance conditions. So you walk in, assess the situation. What were the big performance condition items that you went after early in the first year as you were starting this transformation?
Yeah, so I could talk about this topic for a long time, and I think it's a great way to describe sort of your outlook on optimal performance within a sales organization. But I look for accountability when it comes to professionalism, and it's something that I think has become a little bit flooded with Silicon Valley and some of these other startup technology firms, where they feel like there's a dismissive nature of certain people, either A, not coming in on time, or not working hard, or having flexible work hours. And I think there's a balance that you need to toe the line on. And I really think that comes from the individual. It does come from the culture, but ultimately it comes from the individual, and usually that drives the culture. But accountability to professionalism, accountability to known company metrics. So if you have 2 or 3 company metrics that everybody is well aware of and is completely transparent, you are highly likely to get that person moving in the same direction as the rest of the organization. And then the last thing would just be accountability to professional network growth. I think it's something that gets a little bit lost within the modern age sales organization, even though we put such an emphasis on things like LinkedIn and networking. The people that are actually going out and doing these things are the ones that are going above and beyond. And it's not just sales, it goes to customer success, it goes to marketing, it even goes to the chief executives, it even goes to board members. If you're walking into an organization where they're in front of clients, in front of partners, in front of people who can influence a decision, whether it's today or down the road, there's a certain accountability to that, and I think that drives performance, or optimal performance, as you guys describe it, in any fully functioning sales organization.
What about, and if you think about those conditions, so you talk about accountability, you talk about clarity of metric, I love that. You talk about networking. What about things like comp plans, segmentation, like some of those core building blocks that when you grow up at a place like ADP, they're kind of just done for you, right? Yeah. Did you have a way of prioritizing which items to go after and determining which were the highest leverage spots?
Yeah, I think you want to get involved in all of those things when you're in a large enterprise environment. But the reality is either A, you're responsible for a huge sales force, and you don't have those types of opportunities. So I sort of had my prioritization checklist in my mind based on my experiences of things that I maybe wanted to get involved in and didn't have the opportunity, and now I'm allowed to have my creativity run wild, but also balance experimentation with execution as it relates to first 30 days, first 90 days, and of course, throughout the rest of the year. I think to lay out a 30, 60, 90, 120-day, a 2-year, 3-year plan is a little irresponsible when you're walking into a startup environment. I think you have to lean on the things that are most important to you and where you've witnessed success. So what are those things? I think market segmentation is of the utmost importance, but I think market segmentation is misclassified a little bit when people walk in and ask, okay, so what does that mean? Does that mean geography? Does that mean ideal customer profile type? Does that mean the types of products that one particular segment has bought? I think it's more about the why people are buying from you, the behavioral side of things, and how we can really go down to the human being and not necessarily to the account or the company level, and optimize that segmentation by the human being and not necessarily by the account and the behaviors of that human being, if that makes sense. And that takes a lot of time. So my first priority walking into, whether it was Axial or another opportunity that presented itself to me, that would probably be my first step in.
Okay, very good. So let's now shift to talent. You walk in, and do you have a talent philosophy, and how did you think about like assessing current team, hiring new people, et cetera? What did you do there?
Yeah, first thing is you have to spend a ton of time interviewing people. And when I say interviewing people, just getting to know them at a personal, professional level, and you have to take the time to do it. Yeah. Depending on the size of the organization you're walking into, that's going to vary in terms of the times you can allot to each person in the organization. And it's not just about the people who are there. It's also about the people who had left over the last 6 months. Right. If you can hook up and buy their time, that's a good idea because you kind of get to see the good, bad, and the ugly in every angle of the organization. And that helps you when it comes time to make those hard decisions on whether you want to keep certain folks or just decide that the new culture or the culture that's about to be put in place might not fully align with someone who had been there and been successful over the years. Right. So I think it's an interview process. I also think you have to scale down your expectations of technology that's going to support some of your talent management or talent evaluation initiatives when you're in a young startup type of environment. You have to do this a little bit ad hoc. It has to be one-on-one. It has to be on-the-spot coaching. You have to take the time to do those things. And it goes a really long way. I think employees go home feeling a lot more valued. I really feel like they feel like the executive team has their best interest in mind. Sure. And it's not just this structured review that's happening every 3 weeks, every 9 weeks, every 12 weeks. So I think as a first step in, after having all of the tools at my disposal to go through performance reviews, it's just about getting personal, getting a real understanding about the direction of the company and the direction of that individual.
Okay, very good. So how do you think about, in terms of advice to the new sales leader? So you've now been through it. Rewind the clock a year. Yeah. Give advice to yourself about getting off to a fast start as a newly promoted CRO.
Yeah, the first thing is be accountable to your personal health. That's the first thing.
I wasn't expecting that answer. That's a good answer, though.
Set a routine for yourself and get yourself optimized for performance. And I know that sounds probably a little far-fetched from your question, but it's so incredibly true. Mind, body, and spirit. I'm a big believer in all of those things.
Dude, I'm a routine freak. So every morning.
But I think if you read enough business books and you read and follow and admire certain business leaders who have gone on to be incredibly successful, routine is a big thing. And I think the advice that I would give myself is to stay in that routine for as long as you can and improve that routine, optimize that routine, and then figure out where your time is best spent. And what I mean by that is, at first you want to jump in and dive into everything. You want to learn everything. Yeah. And looking back, that may have not been the best approach in certain circumstances in certain areas. I might have been better off, locking myself in a room and learning something I didn't know before about one of our customers. Or I might have been better off attending a conference that had something to do with, the direction of family offices, right? It just depends on how you prioritize your time. And I think every sales leader or any leader that's walking into an environment like this has a tendency to just want to get totally immersed with everything that's going on. But they're here to solve a problem, and sometimes looking from the outside in and not so inside out right from the get-go is the better approach.
Okay. And then, you think about the time you spent at ADP. I mean, that's one of the organizations that's well known for having a great key account, major account program. Yeah. How did you stage appropriate translate some of that DNA, some of that great rigor into a company at a totally different stage? Or did you? Or is that 2 years away?
No, I don't think it's 2 years away. I think sales process or process discipline and then seeing around corners is important. It was very important at ADP, and it's also very important here. Okay. And I've tried to translate that as much as I can in a much more chaotic environment, but a healthy chaos, and a controlled chaos. And that's okay. I think most startup CEOs and investors would probably be familiar with that description. But ultimately, if you can design, and it's not a perfect design, but if you can design an optimal sales process based on your learnings over your first quarter at that firm, or you can design an optimal handoff process between sales and success, and you could start to really hone in on, what does that look like? How are we going to be as disciplined as we possibly can be? How can this be repeatable? How can this be the one thing we don't miss? And then how do we start to see around corners that we haven't yet seen around? So at ADP, it was a little bit more predictable because they had a proven product. Any sort of expansion that was going on was done very conservatively. New products that were introduced to the market were done with a lot of cash behind them. And the experimentation was controlled amongst a lot of different people. Here, all of those things are hypersensitive because we're not dealing with the same resources. Experimentation could be happening in real time, and at the same time, you have to do your day job, so you're responsible for both of those things. Yep. So I think just bringing some discipline and rigor to some of the processes that are an afterthought in some of these large organizations is really, really important for a small company.
Okay. Very, very helpful. So one of the philosophies we've always had as a firm is the role of the sales manager, the frontline sales manager. We believe that, and the data tells us that that's still the most important person in the company. It's a huge point of leverage. They hire talent, they onboard talent, they help those new reps get up to speed. They're in on the big deals, right, et cetera. And they're promoting others like them to move up the organization. Yeah. So it's a big position of leverage. So how do you think about your team and where you were classically trained in a really good sales management academy?
Yeah.
But you're selling a very different product to different buyers who doesn't have the brand cachet that an ADP does. So how'd you think through that?
So it's such a great question, and I agree with the fact that the sales manager is the most important part of any sales organization, no questions asked. I watched it right in front of my eyes for so many years at ADP. Yeah. They are responsible for pretty much everything. They have the hardest job in the entire sales organization. They should be supported at every turn. So for all the sales managers out there, I've got your back. Amen, I've got your back. And I have a lot of respect for people who go through that process and are successful in that process. And when they come out of that process, they should have a lot of options at their disposal. And the people on the other side should know what they've gone through. So I'm a big fan and a believer in agreeing to what you're saying. So when I transitioned here, there was almost no structure in terms of developing, training, and getting somebody prepared to take a leadership role amongst a younger peer group and a peer group who was probably chomping for that same opportunity, that same position in a very small, tight-knit environment. So performance metrics, performance execution, and the qualitative portion of someone's contribution to culture are all things that have to go into that decision-making process because you have to expose it or people are going to, I don't want to say get angry, but they might be resentful. They might not feel the decision was warranted. And when you're in a smaller company, everything is heightened. Everybody is seeing everything. And you just have to be very, very cautious. And I wouldn't say cautious is probably not the right word. I would say prescriptive with how you make those decisions. And then once somebody is in that position, to support as a leader, whether you're a chief revenue officer, VP of sales, CEO, everybody should have that person's back, fully supported, training. You're not going to have that structured Fortune 200 training, but you will have that on the job, on the spot. And then one last comment to make there, you have to get that person out of the office. That person has to be going to their centers of influence. They have to be going to people who are making a difference, whether it's in this industry or another industry, or they're just not going to get the development they need.
Yep. Okay. Very good. All right. So Ryan and I we're gonna make a little pivot. We're gonna do a little lightning round where I'm going to almost show them like a flashcard of a hot topic that's facing revenue growth leaders. Cool. It's not going to be a real flashcard. I'm going to yell at you.
That's fine.
And we're going to get Ryan's opinion. And talk about some of these things because we sit in this interesting part in the ecosystem where we get to see some of the trends, and obviously the work that we do as a firm is often tied around implementing and helping clients do that with emerging best practices. So let's first talk about marketing and the aspect of your role at Axial. So as a revenue leader, how have you leveraged the output of market segmentation and account segmentation both at the sales level and at the marketing level, so you sort of have more of a revenue orientation versus sales stovepipe, marketing stovepipe, but the two are distant cousins as opposed to an interlocked marriage?
Yeah, so it's an awesome question. The synergy between sales and marketing, there's no secret that has to be there. So that's not a secret to anyone. I think what some people probably don't understand as well as they should is when you're first trying to figure out market segmentation and you're trying to figure out, do we want to start with a sales leader or a marketing leader, or do we need both? Do we need someone that understands the audience more or understands the process more? What does that all look like? And just being at ADP, being where I am now, I've come to the conclusion that understanding your audience from top to bottom, whether you're a marketer, a salesperson, and then planning your strategy, planning your segmentation, taking content and placing it where people are not only reading it, but really believing in it and leveraging it in their own professional lives. There's nothing more valuable than you can do or go out and hire into than that. Okay. I think where young companies get into trouble is they think with all of the systems that are readily available to them, they can solve problems fast. And that's the farthest thing away from the truth.
Yeah. Okay. Good answer. All right. So next one is data. So at SBI, we've seen a big shift in the way that leaders are treating data and moving away from reporting on what's happened and moving towards reporting what will happen. So going from descriptive and diagnostic to predictive and prescriptive, if you think about sort of the analytics continuum.
Sure.
How do you think about that relative to Axial and where you sit?
Yeah, I think it has to be simple. It has to be visual. It has to be reiterated consistently. It has to be a part of the culture. It's sort of that underlying lie detector test that takes the emotion out of everything, right? And as long as people are buying into 3 or 4 different metrics that are impacting the entire organization or impacting their group that's been agreed upon, people usually will buy into that. And when they buy into it and it's visual and it's presented consistently, all of a sudden the input side of data, which is very hard to get to in a lot of young organizations or even mature organizations for that matter, becomes a lot more tolerable.
Well, and if you think about your role, the role of the chief revenue officer and its original roots, right, sits in the fact that you own revenue, marketing, sales, customer success. You own the revenue lifecycle and the entire customer lifecycle. And some people are using chief revenue officer, some people move to chief customer or chief commercial officer. Here's what I would tell you relative to data is you talk about 3 to 4 metrics that everybody agrees upon. Couldn't agree more. And in terms of having a scorecard, and for those that are watching or listening, if you're in an organization where sales and marketing are still separate entities, which is a lot of companies, if you don't have shared metrics, and if you're not all orienting around things like acquisition cost, lifetime value, the cost to serve, how you think about churn, and you each take responsibility, you've got to be a set that you use together. If you're using different metrics, you are not implementing and executing like those who are outperforming the market. So couldn't agree more. All right, last one for you. Account-based marketing.
Yeah.
Is it applicable at Axial? If yes, are you implementing it? If no, how come? And what's your opinion?
So this is near and dear to my heart. Account-based marketing is something that I've been embracing, right from the buzzword became a buzzword and became popular. And we are not only implementing, but it's probably the lever we are pulling the hardest.
Oh, wow.
And the main reason for that is because dealing in the capital markets, again, you're dealing with the person, you're not dealing with the firm. And that's a far cry from a traditional B2B sales environment, right? So you have to keep a very close eye on that human being, and a lot of it has to do to placating the ego, right? Yeah. Making sure that we're placing content where they are, not where the company is. We're understanding the traits of how that person is coming and going to conferences and reading certain articles or journals or networking with like-minded individuals. All of those things are things we need to know, and there's only one way to know that, and there's only one way to market to that, and that's down to the account level and then down to the human being.
Yeah, it's funny, and our businesses are similar that way where, in management consulting, yeah, you build a relationship with company X, but the CEO or the head of sales or the head of marketing hires us. Very often they will leave that company, right? They're not there for 40 years. And they typically take their advisors with them. So this concept of advocate marketing and truly having advocates for the brand that sort of follow and have been able to generate results, there's a personal trajectory along with company trajectory if you think about the solution. So
yeah.
We're very aligned. All right, man. Well, hey, great seeing you.
Yeah, nice to be here.
Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate the contribution. I want to thank the audience for tuning in. Some great insights from Ryan, so we'll continue to wish him well on his journey. And thank you for your continued support. That is all for today, as always. Until next time, I wish you good luck as you try and make your number.
This has been the SBI Podcast. For more information on the studio, SBI's Executive Briefing Center, our team, or to schedule a workshop, please visit salesbenchmarkindex.com.